in.
Cool.
Hey guys, what's up? So glad you're here in the Money Talks group, and obviously I have my guest Todd here, and definitely want to take some time and thank each and every one of you for participating in the group, asking questions, utilizing it for a resource to get yourself going. And like I said, Money Talks, we're all about trying to meet you where you are, help you gain financial traction, and ultimately get not just financial freedom, but your own personal freedom, whatever you want to do, how you want to do it, when you want to do it. That's ultimately what we want to use the tool of money to do. Today, I'm actually excited. If you haven't already, if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. I'll make sure I put Todd's information down there. He has a great channel. I kind of spent the whole Saturday and Sunday going through all this stuff. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. Lots of information if you're looking to get into real estate or just want to connect with them. We'll drop that down there. Also, if you're in the group, we'll drop his information in the group. Probably for Monday because we don't really do things on the weekend. But and then subscribe to him. Subscribe to Money Talks on the YouTube channel. So I'm very excited, guys. Todd is going to kind of talk us through one of the bigger topics that came through this group all towards the end of last year was, hey, I want to get into buying real estate. I want to buy real estate. I want to start my real estate portfolio. How do I do that? So one of the things that Todd has done with his personal life is he's grown his own real estate portfolio, and he's what I would call a success, something that you can actually learn from. And that's why he's here to talk a little bit about his journey, things he's done, but also give you kind of key steps that you can take to walk through trying to buy your first property and get your real estate investing journey going. Sound good, Todd? If you don't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself and let's dive in.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show today. And for anyone who is listening or watching right now, I appreciate it. And hopefully I can answer some questions for you. So, yeah, I'll just get right in. I grew up in a really small hick town. I was raised by a single mother. She was constantly worried about money. So at a very early age, I told myself that I wanted a different life for my family. So that's pretty much how this journey began. I did go to college, but ended up dropping out when I was 22.
Wow.
Yeah, I took a sales job when I was 22. I was working about 100 hours a week for the first 8 or 9 months. But by the end of those 9 months, I was making like 110 grand a year at 22 years old. So that was great for me. And I took every penny of that and I started buying real estate. And I will say, I do have a little bit of a bias because I love real estate. It's worked out really well for me. But in my opinion, real estate is the best vehicle for generational wealth. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about before going on the air. And I know that the folks that we're talking to might be in demographics that don't traditionally have generational wealth. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is because it's passed down through homeownership and owning property. So, are we still there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. No worries. I heard a ring, but basically, a lot of it.
Baby monitor.
Oh, no worries. No, I'm not there yet. But when I have a baby, I'm sure it'll be all over the place. But one of the best ways for generational wealth is through real estate because your kids can't inherit your job, they can't inherit your salary, but they can certainly inherit property that you buy. And, if you get a tenant in there, it pays it off over time. You get that property owned outright and other people pay it for you. So real estate, in my opinion, is one of the greatest wealth building tools out there. But of course, there is a risk to it. And I know we're going to talk about that too. Now it's what you got to learn about it. But in a nutshell, I started buying property when I was 22. 3 years later, when I was 25, my net worth had passed the $1 million mark. So I became a millionaire in my 20s. I'm 28 now. I now have 6 properties. I'm now technically a multimillionaire. And this year in 2021, I am hoping my goal is to make $2 million. So real estate is a game changer, man. It is incredible.
That is phenomenal. So one of the things that I saw when I was watching some of your story was, like you said, you started in your 20s. And one of the key things that you said in that was, I mean, some of us are in our 30s and things of that nature. And obviously we have life, but you said you really didn't go out. You didn't do anything that was kind of typical for, as far as you were making a good income, but you're like, I didn't really go out. I didn't do that. All I did was work and try to invest. And while that may seem extreme, now look at you, you're not even 30 and you have a little bit more option. Obviously, I know you have a little bit more bandwidth to travel, enjoy yourself and things of that nature. But I guess my thing is, so often it's what we're looking at, what we're going to give up versus what we're going to gain. So what are some of the things that you know after looking back and getting started that you know you have to give up in order to try to get this thing off on the ground and running?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, I will say this to anybody out there listening: don't choose what you want now over what you want most. So right now, you might want a BMW or the new PS5 or whatever. That's what you want right now. But what you want most is your grandchildren to inherit an empire. You know what I mean? Like, you want to change your family tree. So I'm really, really big on delaying instant gratification and looking for the long haul. But so, to put it in perspective, that when I was 25 years old, I had a net worth of $1.2 million. My wife and I lived in a house with 6 other roommates. Wow. Meaning there were 8 of us living in one house, but it meant we were living for free and getting paid to live.
Yeah.
Now, we were making $500,000 a year at the time, and my wife and I were sharing one car. So we sacrificed a crazy amount. I mean, almost to the point where it's insane to go that far extreme into the frugality. Yeah. But because of that, in the next year, maybe 2, when we, start our own family, we're in the position where we can now go out and buy a mansion on the lake with a 6-car garage and a helipad. I mean, I'm being real. Like, we can do that because we sacrificed so much in the first half of our 20s. So, yeah, I mean, when I started making money, I didn't go out and immediately buy a brand new car. I still drive an 11-year-old Ford Focus with like 180,000 miles on it. And my goal eventually, I'll get the Tesla Roadster. I'll get a cool car eventually, but I don't need it now. I didn't spend a whole lot of money or time going out and partying. Instead, I was looking at the next property to buy. And whenever I would go out to eat or take my wife out on dates, I use a strategy called secret shopping, which is basically you get reimbursed for your purchases. So I would go to a restaurant or movie theater or whatever. I would get paid for everything that I bought. And then when I filled out a survey at home, I'd get a little bit of profit on the top. So I really wasn't spending any money. And I think that not that you guys have to go as extreme as I did. I understand that's not necessarily sustainable for everybody because I was just kind of crazy in my goals there. But as you mentioned, I'm in the position at 28, like, we could retire tomorrow. We could do whatever we want for the rest of our lives.
Exactly.
Because we buckled down and we hustled for the first 5 years of our 20s. And that's really what it was, is just like nonstop grinding for the first part of our 20s. And now we can do whatever we want for the rest of our life.
So good. So one of the things you mentioned there that I caught was when you go out to buy a property. So I talk all the time that, hey, I work with millionaires, obviously in their mortgage space and their investment properties. And then I worked with millionaires just in their investments for like the stock market and stuff. But one of the things that I saw consistent was that a lot of millionaires that I dealt with or deal with now, they actually lived in the home that was kind of their first one. And then that kind of spiraled. They ended up moving and they just kind of built their portfolio that way, which makes sense. They was like, hey, we could afford it and we eventually paid. You did kind of a typical investment route, which is typically what most people are thinking about probably when they're going out for looking at investment or getting into investment real estate. So how did you start to figure out, okay, based off of your background, you did say you was really born into it. So how was you able to figure out, okay, what do I need to look for in a property if I'm going to get started?
Yeah, great question. So you're right. I definitely was not born into it. I read a lot of books. I'm a big fan of, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant. I read The Richest Man in Babylon. I read a ton of stuff about building wealth and passive income. But my real estate journey was actually kind of a hybrid because there are people who go out and they buy a property just to rent out.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people who go out and buy a property for them to live in. And then, they live there and they move on.
Right.
I actually did both. So my first property that I bought was for me to live in, but I rented out the extra bedrooms in that house to offset my mortgage. So I was living in the master bedroom of, a 6-bedroom, 4-bathroom house. And we rented out every other bedroom in the property. So our mortgage payment was entirely paid for. We were living completely for free. Mm-hmm. So imagine, for anyone listening out there, if your rent payment is 0 and your mortgage payment is 0, that's what it was for us because our roommates were paying it. And then when we bought the next property, we bought it 9 months later. That was just to be rented out. We actually rented out that property by the bedroom as well. Mm-hmm. So we were looking for houses on big lots with lots of parking, no HOA, on a bus line for a good commute, just 25 minutes outside of the city. The biggest thing is we bought in undervalued areas that were poised to go through a transition because then the value will skyrocket. So I bought a house in 2016, and today that house is worth about $300,000 more than what I paid for it. Wow. And it's because it's in an area about 25 minutes outside of downtown Seattle. It was an underdeveloped area, but now they're putting in a new community center and a library and a light rail. Like all these things are going in, making the value rise. But so what I would say, a great way for people to get started, think of it this way. You have to live somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. Like everybody has to live somewhere. So then you're either going to pay off somebody else's mortgage or you're going to pay off your own. So in my opinion, the smartest thing people can do, and not that people have to have roommates because that's not going to work for everyone, especially if you have kids or whatever. But if you can buy like a duplex, which is essentially 2 houses connected together, or a triplex or a fourplex, you live in one unit, you own the whole thing, and you rent out the other units to other people. They're paying off your mortgage for you now. So instead of you renting where you're paying somebody else's mortgage, you have other people paying off your mortgage, building your equity, putting money into your pocket, and you get to live for free. Mm-hmm. So that's how I have always done it. And I think that is the greatest, I guess, hack, if you will, of the century, where you can buy a property for you to live in. You take advantage of all the equity, all the appreciation. You live for free, and it produces cash flow. So right now I live in a duplex. My wife and I bought this duplex August of 2019. First of all, I will say it's already worth $250,000 more than what I paid for it just 2 years ago. And when we first bought this, the other half, we're still on. We get cut off.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. But when we first bought this duplex, we rented out the other half. I converted one of the garage spaces into a studio, and we were living completely for free, plus making $1,800 a month in profit in a house that we lived in.
Oh, wow. So that's marvelous. And like you said, it may not be. Obviously, this situation is a lot difficult for if you have kids. Really, if you have kids, that might not be feasible. But one thing you kept keying focusing on, and I don't know if everyone's catching this, is you rent out. You're really big on renting out the room. So in your experience, that optimizes what you could get out of the property more than just having one.
Certainly. It's a lot more lucrative when you rent it out by the bedroom. Now, it works in the Seattle market because Seattle is really expensive. Right. So a studio apartment here might go for $2,500 for just a studio. So that means there are a lot of young people that are willing to pay $800 or $900 for a bedroom. Right. And if you have a 6-bedroom house at $900 a pop, it's pretty darn good. So I have a house. It's an 8-bedroom, 4-bathroom house. If I were to rent it out to a family, I'd probably get around $2,500 a month for it, maybe $3,000 on the high end, $3,000. Okay. I'm getting $8,000 a month on this one house. And by the way, my down payment for this house was only $60,000. Mm-hmm. So $60,000 was my down payment. I'm making $8,000 per month. $4,000 of that is pure profit. Mm-hmm. So I'm making $48,000 per year off of an investment of $60,000. That's what an 83% cash on cash return. Right. People talk about making a 6% return or an 8% return or a 10% return. I'm making 83% return.
Yeah. Oh man, just flood, and then obviously it starts to when you talk about the compound because as you get more properties, as you get more cash flow, you can open that up for more. But the how difficult then is it when you okay, I decide I want to get this property. What are things that I like you said you're looking at an undeveloped area that has a mark or indication that the area around it is about to grow. So it's undervalued, I'm sorry, right now, but in the next few years, it's going to be growing. And one good way that I know you can look at that is most counties produce their growth plans. So that's one way. What way do you usually check?
Yeah, so absolutely. They produce growth plans. I think for me too, buying outside of a city where people are getting priced out. So in Seattle, like an old kind of gross house will go for over $1 million now in Seattle. So people can't really afford to live there anymore. So they're moving to the outskirts. So what I did was 4 years ago, I bought in the outskirts, right? Like I bought in areas that I knew people would be moving to once Seattle prices them out. And what that meant is the value of my properties has now gone up. And because in Seattle, we have Amazon and Microsoft and
Right.
Starbucks and like all these companies that pay really high salaries and they're building up brand new apartment buildings and brand new homes. And it's getting so expensive. So if you live in a city, I personally wouldn't buy right in that city. I would buy like 20 minutes outside of the city. And if you can buy 10 minutes outside, that's even better. But outside of a major city where it's going to be skyrocketing is the way to go. But yeah, I mean, that's one way of looking at it. The other thing too is just making sure that if you look at trends, like upward trends, the real estate market has been red hot for a while. So people actually thought that I was buying at the top of the market. They thought that I would buy because I bought in 2015. They thought that the market was going to crash, the next year. And here we are in 2021, and at least in my area, it is so hot. Houses are going up. Man. So, I mean, yeah, you want to. I think that it's nearly impossible to time the market, but I do not think the market's going to crash in this year. I don't believe it'll crash in 2021. Wow. So for anyone out there who's interested in buying, I say go for it. I mean, I'm still buying this year too. Right. I would say this: there's a lot of competition. So you want to make sure that your credit is solid. You want to have a good credit score. And for anyone who's kind of curious on how to build credit, I talk a little bit about on my YouTube channel about how to build credit. But one way is to use credit cards. Make sure to pay them off every month. Don't pay any interest. But if you have debts like a credit card that you're paying on every month, you just pay off the balance. So you make it to zero. That'll boost your credit score. You also want to have a good debt to income ratio. So like, if you make $40,000 a year, but you drive an $80,000 Cadillac, that's probably not a good indicator of getting a mortgage. So just, either get your income up or get your debts down, whether it's student loans or car debt or whatever. And actually, since student loan debt, the interest is deferred. If anyone out there has student loans and you pay on those loans right now, 100% of your payments will go directly on the principal, which means you're going to be saving all that interest. So this is a great time to kind of buckle down and pay off those student loans.
Yeah. And you kind of mentioned, and just as somebody who works with people who buy investment property all the time, one of the things that as a lender, what they're looking for is, or you want to look at the long-term gain. So how does it get easier? Well, like Todd just explained, you'll have cash flow coming in. So maybe your first property, you're only getting maybe $500-600 in cash flow or something, and it was a small property. Well, if you are filing your taxes appropriately and you do that with your rental, doing it through a Schedule C, I think it is Schedule C or Schedule E, one of them, and you write it off, you write down the rents, you write down your mortgage interest, you write down your insurance, HOA, any repairs you're doing, what will happen, and even depreciate the property as far as your taxes are concerned. And you do that for at least, well, with real estate, at least 1 year. What happens is when you get ready to go try to finance the next property, you can actually use the income from that property that you already have. So when you, like Todd was just saying about the debt to income, what that means is now when you go to apply, it's going to show that, hey, they already have a renter for this actual property. They are making income. So not only do you get that payment taken out, but you also get the extra cash flow to add to your personal financial situation to qualify for the loan. So if you did what you were supposed to do, keep your debts down low and things of that nature, and maybe your income just doesn't go up that quickly, well, you can still use that income as long as you have at least a year of those payments, and then at least going forward, they'll be able to use that to help qualify you for your next loan so that you can grow a little bit. I thought that might be a good piece of information, but because the thing is on how the income is calculated, it's not just, again, it's not when we calculate your income from a lender perspective on a rental property, it's not just your cash flow that you're getting. We're adding everything that you write off in that income to help calculate the full, what is your true income off this property. So phenomenal stuff. So you mentioned getting the credit together. How would you have a good pulse on, because obviously you're good in your personal finance, and we know, hey, we don't want to pay 25, 30% for the mortgage that we have. How would you look at, hey, I think I'm going to take on another mortgage. What should I really do in my financial situation? How did you kind of assess, hey, I can take on this extra mortgage and be comfortable?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, the first thing, as far as taking on more debt, buying another property, I only ever have bought houses that I knew would make me money. So I'm very, very particular in my criteria for what I look for. Like, I don't buy any houses with an HOA because some HOAs don't allow you to rent them. So I don't do that. I almost exclusively, for investing, I buy in these undervalued areas that are ripe for a transition. I also buy places that I know will cash flow. So like the duplex that I live in now, I looked at properties every day for 10 months before I decided to buy this duplex. And I'm just very picky. But as far as, how do I know it's a good idea to take on a new debt? It's just very simple. If it's going to make you money, then I do it. If it's not going to make me money, then I won't do it. And if it is going to make me money, then what I do is, okay, how much will it make me? And is that a good return, or can I get a better return in the stock market? Okay. That's how I analyze everything. So if I'm looking at the next real estate deal and I say, okay, well, the rent can cover the entire mortgage payment, and that means that the equity is going to be paid down every month, but it can also produce me, $1,500 a month in cash flow. I look at what my down payment would have to be, and I just look at what percentage that is. And I mean, if it's more than what I'm getting in the stock market, then I buy that property. So, I mean, I have a property now. I told you the one I'm getting 80% return on. I have one getting a 130% return on, where I put $19,000 down. Every year, that property pays me $25,000 a year in positive cash flow. That's after the mortgage, after the taxes and insurance, after all the expenses. So to invest $19,000 and you get $25,000 per year, remember, a 10% return would be $1,900.
Right.
100% return would be $19,000. I'm getting $25,000, 130% return on my money. That's a no-brainer. I can think of no better way to spend $19,000 than to get $25,000 a year. Right. The house is going up in value, and the loan is being paid off. Right. So I'm getting triple benefit. And last thing I will say, with rental income, with passive rental income, you can pay no taxes legally because of a very special word that you used a couple minutes ago, which is depreciation. Right. And that is essentially, you can take a percentage of the house and you can depreciate it over time. And for anyone that doesn't know what that concept is, imagine that I wasn't a real estate investor. Imagine that instead I was a farmer. All right. So I'm going to buy a tractor for my farm. Every year, the tractor gets a bit more used up. It's an older tractor. It's rusty. It's whatever. And eventually the tractor is going to be worth zero. So I get a percentage of that tractor and write it off against my taxable income every year. With real estate, you can do the same thing, but the beautiful thing about real estate is it'll never be worth zero. On the contrary, it's going to go up in value. So that's why I love real estate. It's like magic because it's the only investment that I'm aware of that it goes up in value every year. But for tax purposes, you can say it goes down in value every year, meaning you don't have to pay taxes. And I know this is going to be controversial. I'm going to say something controversial right now, but I did a video on my YouTube channel. I wasn't sticking up for him, but I was talking about how it's legal that Donald Trump pays no taxes. I wasn't saying he's a great guy. I was saying how it's legal for him to pay no taxes. And it's because he has a boatload of real estate and he has a depreciation schedule, and he can make passive income and pay no taxes legally.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the thing that, like I said, we're in a time now where more people, is not just when you talk about your personal finance, to be honest, writing a budget, saving, trying to get your credit score, that's great. That's ultra basic. But when you really want to tackle about being wealthy and trying to go down the wealth journey, it's a total different ball game, because what you're trying to do in wealthy, honestly, all your moves financially are, like you just mentioned, are about the return. What is it going to do for me in taxes? And how is it going to help my tax situation so that I can grow forward? The wealthy people, at least the number one concern that I see about wealthy people is they're concerned about taxes. They're concerned about what they can do with the tax code. How can they use the capital gains real estate? Like, you got so many different ways you can do it, but ultimately you want to create a scenario where you're like, okay, I bought this, but how can I use this to get a tax benefit? I bought the car. We all buy cars. We all know how to buy cars. What we don't know how to do is allow that car that we bought to affect our tax, buy the car in such a way that it affects our tax bill, because you can pay off all the debt in the world. If you don't know your taxes, you're going to always have a tax bill. If you want money going forward, that's going to be more important and fall in line. Like, hey, I really got to get control of these taxes. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, because me and my wife kind of went back and forth about people paying their fair share. I was like, I mean, he used the tax code, and somebody wrote the tax code and they said this is fair. So, I mean, if it was you, if somebody gonna say, hey, you can take this rule, or you can pay $100,000 in taxes. If it was you, which one are you gonna do? And most people, they're not gonna be like, "Oh, I'm gonna pay $100,000, or I'm gonna pay all these taxes for the team." They're like, "What team? The team of me?" So, no, I'm very glad you mentioned that, because it's not just about the cash flow. I always say it's about what it does to your tax situation, and that's why you really need a good CPA, because you need to understand what your particular tax situation is and how you can go about maximizing that. So good. So you talked a little bit about, or if you could please touch on, it seems like you have a little bit more of a buy and hold strategy rather than flipping every 30, 60, 90 days. What are the contradictory factors to why you went that way? And as somebody who's kind of in the business and been in the business some years, I know you have seen or have contact or have a little bit of knowledge of, okay, people do flip every 30 days. What is the benefits that you've seen that help from those two strategies?
Yeah, so flipping properties is a great way to generate cash. You can generate a lot of cash in a short amount of time. And buy and hold is more to build wealth. So there is a difference between rich and wealthy. Rich is about your income. It's about how much money you make. And wealthy is about how much money you have, how much money you keep. And for me, my goal has always been to build wealth, because wealth is what's generational. Rich is temporary. Like, you'll see a lot of, there's a reason why 75% of football players, when they're done playing football, they go broke. They're rich. They make a lot of money, but they don't know how to keep it. They don't know how to save it and invest it. Mm-hmm. So buy and hold is all about building wealth, while flipping properties is about making as much money you can as a short term, which is fine. I mean, you can do both. I know people that buy and hold some and they flip some. For me, I've never flipped a property because I'm more invest for the long term. That's how I do stocks too, by the way, is I've traded in the past, but I'm by no means a day trader. I invest for the long term. I don't really care what the stock market does in the next 2 hours. I care about what it's going to do over the next 15 years. And that's what I think about real estate too. So it's just a different mentality, right? Like, I made a post the other day about how someone who's rich might take $200,000 and go buy a Lamborghini, right? But someone who's wealthy will take $200,000. They will go buy an asset that will pay them 10 grand a month. Mm-hmm. And out of that 10 grand a month, they can go finance that Lamborghini at 0%. They'll have about 6 grand left over every month. They can do whatever they want with. And after 5 years, the Lamborghini's paid for in full. They still have that asset that's building 10 grand a month, and they can use that to in turn go buy another asset and another and another. And all of a sudden, now you're making, gosh, $30,000-$40,000 a month, and it's all passive income that you're paying no taxes on. And that's what I'm doing now. I actually, we're making it's 38, so almost 40 grand a month.
Oh wow,
in passive income that we don't have to pay any taxes on. So it's just that's the way I do it.
But it took you you barreled down for 5 years to get this thing off the ground. So what are some things that you kind of mentioned where you would buy, why you do the strategy you use? So all of these you kind of accumulated. So you've been doing this, if you're 28, about 7 years. And you, I guess, if I gather correctly, you just kind of held through all of the same properties. You haven't sold any.
Right. Yeah. So I actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I will be selling one this year to free up some capital. But yeah, no, I'm selling one that I bought in 2016, but it's because I'm freeing up some capital to buy like a 50-unit apartment building. So I want to move into apartment buildings next. Moving up. But yeah, the other ones, I've just held the whole time, kept renters in them, paying down the equity. They're going up in value, and it's been phenomenal.
Okay. So that was going to be kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about. How did you go about finding and kind of ensuring that you could get a renter? So what was your process? Did you get one before you even said, hey, there's going to be a rental property? Did you already kind of screen it out? What was your process for doing that? And how did you even kind of evaluate like, hey, I want this person as a renter?
Yeah. So I was very aggressive with my strategy. So as soon as I made an offer on a property and they accepted the offer, I started advertising that property for rent. So I would advertise it for rent before it was even mine. Okay. I knew it would be mine. I knew that I was buying it. But as you know, closing time can take 30 to 45 days.
35.
Right? So I was advertising properties 30 to 45 days before I even got the keys. So by the time it was actually mine, I had a tenant in there right away. So I didn't miss any month's rent ever. I didn't even miss the day's rent. As soon as the keys are mine, I had that place rented out.
You probably had an extra month if they was in there, before you start making the payment.
I know, exactly. No, the 8-bedroom house that I told you about where I'm making about $8 grand a month on, I bought that house, I believe I closed on it February 16th of 2018. I had all 8 bedrooms leased out by March 1st.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was making $8 grand a month 2 weeks after I got the keys to that house. And that first month, you're right, there is no mortgage payment. So I just got $8 grand, boom, right away, no mortgage payment. The next month, I got another $8 grand. The mortgage payment and all the expenses came out to $4 grand. So I was making $4,000 cash flow immediately. So yeah, I advertise everywhere. I advertise on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. There's an app called RentHoop, which is specific for room rentals. There's another app called Roomy, which is also specific for room rentals. I was advertising on Zillow, Trulia, pretty much, Hot Pads, pretty much anywhere I could get to. But the biggest two were Craigslist and Facebook. Those are the two that I got the most traction on. And I even had, it was funny, dude. I did a house tour one time. One was on Instagram and one was on Snapchat. And I got tenants that way too. Like someone saw my Instagram video and was like, hey, this is a dope house. And I was like, if you want to live in it, let's talk. And then, of course, you do a background check. I do my screening through a company called Smart Move TransUnion. There are many out there. That's just the one that I use. I have a really solid lease in place. And then, I interview people after the screening. So it's been great so far.
Oh, wow. So do you typically charge any like application fees, late fees? How do they typically pay you? What are things that you do for like the more tactical PC?
Yeah. So the application, it's all through Smart Move TransUnion. It costs the renter $40. It's free for the landlord. So when I send you a background check, you would pay $40. It doesn't cost me anything. So for the landlord, it saves them a lot of money. As far as how I collect payment, it's all electronic because I didn't want to go chasing down a check that might bounce. And I didn't want cash because cash can be dangerous. So everybody pays with either Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, or Cash App. Those are what I take. So everybody pays that way. And yeah, I mean it's pretty streamlined. Like because I can collect rent electronically, if the tenant's on vacation or if I'm out of town, I still get rent, deposited just like it normally would be because I don't have to go meet up anybody for cash. So yeah, it works out well to do it electronically.
And then you had mentioned, and I might have just forgot it, but you had just mentioned, okay, your background check. What are some things you're looking for in the background? Because obviously some people are renters and they're renters for a reason. So, but that may not necessarily mean they'll be a bad renter. So how are you kind of figuring out, hey, I can rock with this person?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't, if someone has a bad credit score, that isn't immediately a red flag. Um, I understand that people can go through a divorce and have a bad credit score, or someone could be 22 and they have no credit. They don't have a credit card yet. So maybe they just have nothing. So it's not a death sentence for me if you have a bad credit score. What I look for is the debt to income ratio. I look at how much are your expenses going out and how much money do you have coming in monthly. And if the difference between those two numbers is less than what the monthly rent is, it's not going to work out. Because if the monthly rent is $900 and after you take in your income, but you pay all your expenses, you're making $700. Well, that's not enough for rent or food or, all the other stuff. So I look at debt to income ratio. Because it's
on the application.
Yeah. On the application, it's all through Smart Move TransUnion.
Okay.
It'll tell me everything. It'll tell me credit score, criminal history, eviction history, your debt to income ratio. I do look at eviction history. If you've been evicted, I want to know why. I want to know what happened there. And I look at criminal history too, because most of my properties are rented out by the bedroom. So if some dude beat the hell out of his girlfriend, I don't want him to be roommates with a female. I'm just not going to do that. So I look at criminal history too.
Okay. Oh man, that's so good. I hope if you guys are enjoying it, please drop some comments below. Ask some questions. I mean, he is really laying it on very, very thick. So you talked about the debt to income. You talked about even how you evaluate your person. And I'm the same way. Like, I think that's one of the benefits of working in the financial services industry, being able to look at somebody's report. You can typically, for me, I can usually see the story behind the story. If you're bankrupt, hey, you might just fell on a hard time. A lot of divorced people, that's kind of typical that they would have a lower credit score. You're right. What's the typical story? And even if you have a bad history, I can usually glean from a conversation from somebody, have they actually changed from what they're doing? And this is part of their change. If they haven't, yeah, I can't rock with you too much either. So what would you say in terms of financing that you say, because right now we're at historically low rates, even for investment property. Like I'm seeing, like just earlier, I was playing with, or not playing, but I was talking with somebody, and you can get a 3.125 for a 30-year on an investment property. You can buy investment property and get that type of rate. So what would you say in terms of financing is your way of doing things? And I don't know if you mentioned, but you have 6, so are some of them paid off at this point?
No, so I actually don't pay off. I haven't paid off any of them.
Okay.
But it's because the interest rates are so low that I can get a better return if I invest elsewhere. So I'll answer that question first, and then I'll back into how I finance. So, for example, I have a mortgage payment where the interest rate is 2.8%, right? Mm-hmm. So I could take $500,000 and go pay off that property. But I could also take that $500,000 and invest in the stock market where I'm getting right now 15%. So although I'm losing 2.8% on the house, I'm getting 15% in the market. Right. So I'm 12 points ahead on the spread, right? And even so, let's say it wasn't a stock market. I talked about how I'm making 80% cash on cash return with one deal, 130 on another one. Again, if I'm paying 2.8 or 3% on an existing mortgage, instead of taking money to pay off that mortgage, I could go invest the money elsewhere and make, again, an 80% cash on cash return or a 40%. So it's just about how it's about if I can make more on the spread. Right. So I'll never pay it off. It's just what's beneficial to me.
Well, prior is what you're saying. Like usually got to ride the time. Or do you think it will get like you will get so much into it, meaning you'll get so far. Maybe if it's a 30-year loan, you get maybe to year 20 or 20, you know what I'm saying? When it gets down to where it starts to dwindle down, you're like, I might as well knock this thing off.
Totally. Yeah.
So,
it completely depends on what the market is doing.
Yeah. So, but initially you're like, hey, I'm getting it. What am I? You're looking at it from what is the cash flow I'm getting after the mortgage, and then are you typically doing 30 years, or are you doing shorter terms than that?
All of them are 30 years.
Okay.
I would say for people that are just starting out, if you haven't bought a house yet, take advantage of a first-time home buyer program. You can buy up to 4 units, owner-occupied, up to 4.
Yeah.
So you can go out and buy a fourplex. You can put 5% down instead of putting 20% down, and you can put 5% down with no PMI, and you can get a better interest rate than an investment property. And you can live in one you can live in one apartment and rent out the other 3 apartments in that fourplex, and you're living for free, and you only had to come up with 5% down. So that's the way I would finance for anyone who doesn't buy a house yet or hasn't bought a house yet.
Right.
Take advantage of a first-time home buyer program, buy it owner-occupied with 5% down, get the lowest interest rate possible. I saw one the other day for 1.7% on an owner-occupied.
Yeah.
It's basically, here's the reason why I'm not paying off these houses.
Yeah.
When it's that cheap to borrow,
yeah,
it is basically free.
Yeah.
It's basically free because the house is appreciating at a faster rate than 1.7% or even 3%. So the house is going up in value at more than that. Inflation is going up more than that. So I can borrow $500,000 in today's value, only pay 2% on it, and then I have tenants in there that are paying it off. It's essentially free money. I will borrow as much free money as I possibly can, so long as it's going to go make me more money. So people that say stay out of debt, it's the bad debt that you want to stay out of.
Right.
Bad debt is debt that you have to pay off yourself. Good debt is debt that other people, i.e. your tenants, pay off for you. So if like the apartment building I want to buy, it's $5 million. I'll have to put $1 million of my own cash down, which means I'll have a $4 million loan, but the interest rate 2.8%.
Yeah.
And I'll be able to pay off that thing no problem. Well, because I'll have tenants in there that make it. So that's what I'm doing.
No, it's so good. So while you're speaking, the questions are starting to roll in. So the first thing is we have a gentleman that has 4 properties right now, and he wants to know what is the best way to scale and acquire more properties without putting up so much of his own capital.
That's a great question. So, I mean, if you have equity in the 4 properties, you can always do a cash out refi where you basically pull out money from your existing properties to then put towards the next one. Or you could do some sort of real estate syndication thing where you start an LLC, you start a business, and the business is basically to go buy more real estate. You have other investors put money into that business, which you use for the down payment for an apartment building. And then you work out a deal as far as, what return they're going to get. If anybody out there watches Grant Cardone, that's what Grant Cardone does. The man owns $2.3 billion worth of real estate. He is a real estate syndicator, which means he has a fund and people put money into this fund and they say, hey, I want a piece of the action. Here's money. Go buy real estate. And he does. And he gets a huge benefit from it because it's his name on the mortgage. It's his name on the building. He just pays them like an interest rate for putting in money. So that's one way to do it. So that's a great way. I think there are other ways too for zero down structures. If you do seller financing, the thing is, if someone is savvy, like I personally would never sell a house with seller financing because I'm too smart. I wouldn't do that. I would get all my money right away. There are some people that are willing to sell a house, seller financing at 0% interest. I've seen it done. I've seen people sell in the Midwest like a $50,000 house with no down payment, 0% interest. The new buyer pays off the house in like 9 years, but they put a tenant in there, so it's actually paid off for them, and they own a house free and clear in 9 years. Then they put 10 grand into it, and the house is worth $80,000. So there are ways to do it. It's just like it just kind of it depends on your market and kind of what you're looking for.
So good. You mentioned a little bit going into the refinance cash out, but one, would you refi? And I see it a lot. Would you refi cash out of your rental to go buy another property? If so, what is your thought process for doing that? I know, but I just for people.
Yeah. So basically, if you buy a rental house, you put a tenant in there, maybe you fix up the property, or even if you didn't need to fix up the property, if you just waited and now it's worth more, you can essentially refinance the house for the new value that the house is at. And hopefully that's more than what you paid for it, whether it's you fix it up or you waited. And then you can take out a part of that difference and you can use that cash to go buy the next property. So this is actually a great strategy. I think earlier on this call, maybe it was before on the air, you talked about Graham Stephan.
Right.
That's a lot of what he does.
Okay.
Is he buys a property, he fixes it up, it's now worth more, so then he pulls the cash out of it and he goes and buys the next one. Yeah. So that's a great strategy.
To your point, that might actually be, to our first question, that might be an actual solution for you where you don't have to use your money as much or tie up so much of your money. You can use the property to kind of finance themselves forward to scale. Mm-hmm. And then as you get more cash flow, you can kind of mix. But yeah, the whole point is, at least when I look at it, what is the interest rate you're getting now? What is that going to do to your profit margin if you do take that money out? Are you, which a pivot before we go to this next question, do you raise rents? How are you setting your rent prices?
Great question. So I never actually raise rents on existing tenants. So I have a tenant who's been renting from me for the last 4 years. I have never once raised rent on her, and I never will. When somebody moves out and I re-rent out the space, I rent it for market rent. I rent it for as much as I can get it.
But, okay. So the same person gets the same rate, but a new person would get a new rate.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So if you rent from me, whether you live in my house for 6 months or 6 years, doesn't matter. Your rent is not going up. As soon as you move out and I rent out the space to somebody else, I raise the rent to whatever I can get for it. The only reason an existing tenant would have their rate change is if they upgraded or downgraded units. Mm-hmm. So if I have somebody renting a regular basic bedroom, but a year later they want to rent the master that has its own bathroom, that's more expensive. But I never, ever just raise the rent on people. And one thing I'll go back because you asked another question about interest rates and stuff.
Right.
A lot of people are saying they're going to wait for the market to crash before they buy a house. But remember, when markets crash, interest rates go up. Right. And I actually put a video out on my YouTube channel the other day, maybe 3 days ago, talking about how if you buy a house today for $700,000 at a 2% interest rate, you actually save money versus buying a house for $500,000 at a 5% interest rate. I ran this scenario because I've had people ask me if they should wait till the market crashes. Here's how it works. If you buy a house for $700,000 at 2%, over the 30 years, and I'm assuming you put 20% down, but over the 30 years, what you'll have paid is like $180,000 in interest, and you will have paid like $740,000 on the loan, something like that. If instead you buy a $500,000 house at 5% interest, you'll be paying about $300,000 in interest, and you'll be paying like $770,000 over the life of that 30-year loan. So you actually save $30,000 over the life of the loan by buying a house that's $200,000 more expensive today at a lower interest rate.
So good. Ooh. So good. I hope you guys, if you don't, this will be on YouTube and it's available in the Money Talks group, so you can watch this thing over and over again. But it's very important. Again, we want to talk the details. We want to give you really good insight as to how these deals go. What are best ways that you can get yourself going? Couple more questions. How long do you hold it before you can cash out? I know particularly if it's an investment property, once you have it, I mean, it's really just depending on the value, to be honest, because if you're doing just a regular refinance on your primary, you can actually refinance that thing the next day. But on an investment property, because of the, like you said, the buy and hold and all that, the flipping scenario, you may have to wait sometimes 6 months from a lender's perspective, but typically it's more because of the time we're in. There are people that'll do it like right away. And the reason for it is, again, if the value, there's a law, no matter where you go, if you're refinancing, whether it's an investment property or any property, there has to be a net tangible benefit for you. So if your net tangible benefit, your payment is going up, but you're getting $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 out the house, that's the benefit. You're getting the cash, even though your payment's going up and your interest rate may change. So that's how you would look at that. And I think you already mentioned this, but I'm going to say it just one more time. Asked about how to structure an owner finance deal and a deal where I get money from a silent investor. And I think that might have been alluded to the Grant Cardone strategy that you mentioned, but you can clarify.
Yeah, awesome. So a seller finance deal is basically, it usually happens if somebody wants to sell their home off the MLS, meaning it's an off-market deal. They're doing a for sale by owner or something like that. And the reason why they would want to sell it not on the MLS is so they don't have to pay the commission to a real estate agents. Oftentimes the commission is 3% to both agents, so 6%. If you're selling, let's say, an $800,000 house, that means you're paying $50,000 in commissions. You don't want to do that to your equity. So some people will be willing to sell it with seller financing, meaning instead of getting a loan from the bank, you write up a contract with the homeowner. You say, I'm going to buy this house from you. I'm going to pay it off over time. And you guys create terms, and those terms can be whatever you guys make. I've seen them as low as 0 down and 0%. Those are usually for less expensive houses, usually in the South or the Midwest, that are like $50,000 to $75,000. But I've seen it done where you can go to someone who has a $50,000 house, give them no money down, you pay no interest, you pay them, I don't know, $400 a month over 10 years, or however the math works out. I don't have my calculator right in front of me, but over 9 or 10 years, you're paying off the house, and that house is now yours. But what the smartest people do is they when they buy this house, they put a tenant in there that's paying $900 a month. So you're paying the previous owner, $400 a month. The tenant that you put in there is paying $900 a month. You're getting paid $500 a month on a house that, technically speaking, you don't even really own. But then after 10 years, the house is yours. Now you own a house free and clear, and you still have that tenant in there paying $900 a month. So that is the way for seller financing. And as far as the syndication goes, it has to be for commercial deals. Because as you know, I can't borrow money to then go borrow money, right? Like if I'm going to do a deal with you to buy a single family home to live in, I can't get like $50,000 from my cousin and then say, okay, I have my down payment now. You're going to want to know, where did that money come from? Is it a gift? Is it a loan? All that stuff. With commercial, they don't care about that. They just want to know if the debt's going to service. So you start a company, ABC Real Estate Incorporated, whatever you want it to be, right. And you have this real estate fund. People can invest money into your fund, and you take that money and you use that as a down payment to go buy property. By the way, if anyone's familiar with the company Fundrise, that is exactly what they do.
Yeah, and they do jack you too. The contract is jack.
Yeah. But that's what they do, right? If I want to invest in real estate, but I'm too scared to do it, I can give money to Fundrise. I can give $500 to Fundrise, and they can go buy property, and I will say own, because you don't really own, but you will have a small piece of this property we're getting some cash flow from. You can do the same thing. You can basically be Fundrise, just treat your investors better, because Fundrise is trash.
Yeah. Fundrise is trash. They will hold your money. You be ready to pull out, but they can only pull out if it's a certain time. It's a weird structure. Not so good, man. So it's so chock full. I'm even gonna watch this thing like 2 or 3 times because it was just so much good details that you dropped. One last thing, or a couple of things as we begin to wrap up. One of the things that I want to mention, the management aspect. How are you managing your property? You got 6. So do you have a management company? Is there value there? What do you see is essentially the core pieces that somebody should be ready to take on if they're managing? Because if you're starting this, like you said, you started when you was working. So there is going to be some time commitment, some responsibility there.
I actually still manage all the properties myself.
Okay.
When I get the apartment building, I will hire a management company for that. But for these single family homes, I manage it all by myself. It's really like, there'll be months where there's nothing to do, and then there'll be one day where there's like 12 hours of stuff to do. But on average, it comes out to like 5 hours a week, so really not bad. But yeah, I see value in a management company, but I don't need it yet.
Okay. No, that's perfect. And then one thing that I always, I appreciate you coming on. One thing I always encourage people to do as we're going, and usually it's about the debt freedom journey, but in this case, it's more about wealth building. And really, to be honest, what I've seen is a lot of people are just simply, like you said, kind of scared of real estate, kind of scared of stepping out. It is a risk. I mean, I try to simplify it to be like, hey, if this thing goes south, just sell the property, get your money back and move on and try again. But you'll never truly know. Stocks can be scary. All this stuff can be scary. It's a responsibility, but what would you do or say to someone to encourage them that wants to get started on this journey?
Man, it just goes back to this. You got to live somewhere. You got to live somewhere. You have three options. All right. You have three options. You're going to be homeless and live under a bridge. You're going to live with your parents forever, or you're going to live in your own place. And if you live in your own place, you're either going to rent it, paying somebody else's mortgage off, or you're going to own it, paying off your own mortgage. So what I would encourage everybody to do, buy your own place, hopefully a small multifamily where you can also put other tenants in the other units and pay it off for you. I started with a single family home and I rented out the bedrooms. I know that's not realistic for anyone out there who's married with kids. I get that. So, but when even if you buy a place for you to live in and you don't rent out the other units, or you just buy a single family home and you don't have roommates, at least you're capturing your dollars back, because every month when you make that payment, part of it is building equity in your house and you're getting the appreciation. So I would encourage everybody to at least buy the house that they're going to live in. At the very least, do that. Even if you don't want to have tenants or whatever, the real estate, it's generational wealth. I mean, if you buy a house today, it's going to be worth more in 30 years. It will be worth more in 30 years. So, do that. Then pass it on to your kids and help them build wealth.
Yeah. And then one last thing, I didn't want this person to be left behind. He says he has the opportunity to get a 4-unit building for a good price. The issue is that he's having with getting it is the owner let him know that none of the tenants are paying rent, obviously due to COVID, and the new rules around tenants and not having to pay. How should he particularly move on this particular deal?
So I personally, if I had tenants that weren't paying in a building that I was thinking of buying, I wouldn't keep any of those tenants. I mean, if they're just choosing not to pay, if they actually have a hardship and they can't pay, I could work with them. But if they have money and they're just choosing not to pay, I wouldn't keep them. You can evict tenants if you're going to sell. So for example, let's say he has that fourplex, right? The owner of that building, if he's selling it, he's truly selling it, he can issue all those tenants 60 days notice to vacate. That's one of the loopholes about evicting people during this time. You can't evict if your intent is to sell, and the new owner plans to occupy. So the new owner could occupy one of those units. All those bad tenants are evicted, and then he could fill those units with people who will pay rent. That's what I would do. I will say that I have collected 100% of all of the rent that I was due in 2020. I didn't miss a single month, not one. So there are certainly, you got to pick the right tenant. You got to pick the right tenant. That's it.
Yeah, so good, my friend. Todd, I want you to hang out with me in the back. But guys, I appreciate you stopping in. Again, this will be posted on YouTube on Sunday. If you haven't already, please like this video. Check the description below. Go check out Todd's channel where he's dropping. I mean, if you thought this was great, I'm telling you, I watched his channel. I'm still working through the library, but I got pretty deep into it. He is dropping major things that is helpful to make you understand and help you understand how to go about taking on real estate. And granted, he doesn't have hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate, but he's done it and he has had a level of success with it. So it's important that hey, when I wanted to make a 6-figure career, I hung around people who did 6-figure. Want to go into real estate? I'm learning from somebody that is doing real estate and getting rent and showing me what they're doing. So I would tell you, like, subscribe, check out his channel, stick with us. We'll definitely have more coming to you. And I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Let's see.